Jon Jones has been in the media recently for continuously ducking Tom Aspinall, and in this video, I am going to absolutely expose him to the new fans that don't know the crap that he has done to the UFC and to everybody outside the UFC, and I'm going to prove to all of his haters or fans why I can't stand this guy and why he doesn't deserve anything he has. I all the time get called out of my comments for being a Jon Jones hater. Dude, you're just a hater. You don't want to see another man succeed. You just want to hold him down, blah, blah, blah. Well, after this video, let's see if these dorks, these Jon Jones defenders, keep that same energy, because this guy has taken the UFC through the ringer. He's been a PR nightmare. He's been an absolute scumbag outside the UFC. He's been a duck, a steroid cheat, all the above. And I'm going to go through the entire thing today. And yeah, I can't wait to see what the comments on this video are going to be. Dude, another video hating on Jon Jones. But either way, let's start off with this controversies, right? Jon Jones has a long history of controversies. That is no secret. In 2012, Jon Jones crashes his Bentley, and while drinking and driving, he was given a DUI back in 2012. In 2012, how old was Jon Jones? He won the belt in 2011 at 23. So he was 24 years old. Crashes Bentley, right? 2012. Not the craziest thing in the world. You know, young guys make mistakes. You give a guy a lot of money. He crashes Bentley. It is what it is, right? Fast forward 3 years later. Jon Jones, 3 days before his first fight with Daniel Cormier at UFC 182, tests positive for cocaine. Jon Jones, the biggest fight of his life, fighting an Olympian wrestler in Daniel Cormier, tests positive for cocaine. And not too much happened from this, because I don't think that cocaine was a listed banned substance in terms of like competing in the UFC, which is crazy. Apparently you can be coked out of your mind and be in the octagon back in 2015. But nonetheless, Jon Jones tests positive for cocaine, right? That same year, Jon Jones, after defeating Daniel Cormier, was stripped of his UFC title after he hit a pregnant woman, right? Hit a pregnant woman in his car, right? Broke her arm, ran from the scene, came back to the scene to grab some weed and a bunch of cash, and then left the scene again, later turning himself in the next day to authorities, admitting what he had done. So he hit a pregnant woman, broke her arm, and his first reaction was to leave the scene and not check if they were okay. This was the early signs of how much of a scumbag Jon Jones truly is, because first of all, if you do a hit and run, you're the scummiest of the scum of the earth. The fact that it was a pregnant woman and you broke her arm, Jon Jones was an absolute terrible human being by this point. But nonetheless, let's move on. He hits the pregnant woman. He loses his belt. He goes in front of the media crying, all this boohoo stuff. 2019, fast forward all the way to 2019. Jon Jones pleads no contest after being accused of assaulting a woman at a New Mexico strip club. This flew under the radar. A lot of people don't know about this story, but apparently Jon Jones slapped a woman, touched her hair, and tried kissing her at a nightclub in 2019. And yeah, nobody talks about this. This is brushed under the rug. Jon Jones, another controversy back in 2019. You know, he's out partying in strip clubs and he's touching up on women despite having a fiance with multiple kids. This is Jon Jones. And yeah, I think he has a deep hidden hatred for women for some weird reason. I don't know. Maybe you guys can tell me why. But yeah, this happened back in 2019, 2020. Jon Jones arrested on a firearm charge after police heard a gunshot. If you guys do not remember, there was a clip of Jon Jones in his car, and the police heard a gunshot. Jon Jones is approached by the cops, asked if he knew where the gunshot came from. He said no, visibly drunk. Jon Jones was eventually arrested on a firearm charge after discharging his firearm and drinking while driving. So that happened back in 2020. 2021, this is arguably the worst of them all. Jon Jones is arrested on misdemeanor domestic violence charge in Las Vegas. And this is the part where he allegedly assaulted his fiance, Jessie. And this is where you saw the clip of him banging his head against the cop car saying, I hate you guys, I hate you. That whole clip. And this is the night of this dude getting inducted into the Hall of Fame. This dude couldn't even keep it together on the night when he was getting inducted into the Hall of Fame. Allegedly beating his wife, banging his head against cop cars, an absolute embarrassment to the UFC overall. This was supposed to be like a crowning moment for Jon Jones. Let's move forward. 2024, Jon Jones threatens to kill a drug tester. Jon Jones went, I believe it was a drug testing agency that showed up to his house to get his urine, and he threatened to kill the lady. I forgot the whole story, but this is another story that gets brushed under the rug. Obviously, Jones denied it, but given his history, are we really going to... Is this something that's out of the realm of possibility for Jon Jones to say that he didn't threaten to kill a drug tester? Either way, compared to all the other crap he's done, this was minor. So that's pretty much, we're caught up to the outside the octagon controversies of Jon Jones. As you guys can see, he had a troubled past. Why on earth would anyone want to support this guy? But it doesn't end there. Let's get into his steroid usage, because that's the big thing. His fans always like to claim, dude, you don't ever have anything to say about Jon Jones is like inside the cage. It's always about outside the cage. Well, let's talk about inside the cage, because guess what? He was using PEDs while performing inside the cage. Jon Jones in 2016 pulled off of UFC 200 over a potential doping violation. Jon Jones tested positive for letrozole metabolite and hydroxychloroquine. These two steroids, or steroid maskers, are known to mask whenever somebody takes steroids. So you take these to offset steroids, so it makes it look like you didn't do steroids. Anti-estrogen drugs are typically used in doping to counteract the effects of another illegal substance, such as steroids. Steroids or other similar substances that introduce extra testosterone in the human body, which produces additional estrogen as a natural result. Additional estrogen can result in fat retention or potentially lead to gynecomastia, which is a breast grown in men. Israel Adesanya and Manel Kape know about that. But either way, Jon Jones was doping, gets pulled off of the biggest card in UFC history at UFC 200, ruins the entire card, right? That's not all. 2017, Jon Jones returns after his 15-month suspension. Allegedly, Jon Jones had a 2 to 3 year suspension, but after snitching on someone, USADA agreed. He snitched on someone else allegedly doing roids, and USADA agreed to lower his sample, or lower his suspension down to 15 months. What an absolute weasel this guy is. So 2017, he fights Daniel Cormier for the second time. He knocks him out via head kick, TKO, right? Comes back after that, he tests positive for turinabol, an anabolic steroid. Jon Jones tests positive for steroids back in 2017. He gets stripped of his title. The win is turned to a no contest, and Daniel Cormier is given the belt back, right? So that's two different tests within a year, a little over a year. Jon Jones tests positive for steroids 2 different times, right? Fast forward a year later, he's facing Gustafsson for the second time, right? Jon Jones has picograms pulsing in his system, the first UFC fighter in history to have steroids pulsing in the system. And what does the UFC do? So Vegas will not sanction Jon Jones to fight. They think that the steroids in the system is not like okay for him to fight, right? So the UFC doesn't take Jon Jones off the main event. No, they move the entire UFC 232 card, Jones versus Gustafsson 2, on a week's notice from Las Vegas to LA, so Jon Jones can remain on the card and have pulsing picograms in the system. And what do you know? It's one of his best performances. He blows Alexander Gustafsson out of the water, runs through him, beats the brakes off of him. And Jon Jones is the only UFC fighter in history to have pulsing picograms in his system while also getting entire UFC events moved on a week's notice just so he can continue to fight. What does Jon Jones have on Dana White? That's what I would like to know. It doesn't end here. Moving on. Jones takes off 3 years when Ngannou's the heavyweight champion, right? You don't see Jones anywhere, right? Francis Ngannou, right, became the heavyweight champion, I believe, in 2021. Jon Jones fought Dominic Reyes in 2020, arguably lost. Most people thought he lost that fight, including myself. I thought that was a clear loss. Nonetheless, he gets the win over Dominic Reyes, right? Francis Ngannou is the heavyweight champion. Jon Jones has been saying forever, hey, man, I want to go up to heavyweight. What a coincidence. Ngannou, the scariest puncher in UFC history, is a champion. Jon Jones starts demanding FU money, starts demanding $30 million. And then Dana White even says that if he's Jon Jones, he's going to middleweight, if all this other stuff. And Dana White even openly said that Jon Jones was pricing himself out of the Francis Ngannou fight, right? And arguably ducking Francis Ngannou. But what do you know? Francis Ngannou, the negotiations fall through. He wants more money as a heavyweight champion. He wants healthcare, all this stuff. Nonetheless, he ends up going to the PFL. Jon Jones mysteriously appears in the heavyweight division like Houdini the second Ngannou leaves to face Cyril Gane, who happens to be the worst grappler in UFC history. And let me just say, I'm not saying Cyril Gane took a dive at UFC 235, but that was a hella suspicious performance. Either way, when have we ever seen Cyril Gane give up that easy? But either way, Jon Jones beats Cyril Gane, and a lot of people were saying he ducked Francis Ngannou. I 100% believe he ducked Francis Ngannou, but his fans will tell you, hey, man, he was just negotiating, man. He's not ducking, dude. Jon Jones is not ducking, dude. He's beat everybody. He's the light heavyweight GOAT. Why does he have to be scared of Francis Ngannou? Dana White was even claiming that he was scared of Francis Ngannou. But guess what? Whenever the UFC had negotiation, like, go sour with Ngannou, they flipped the script. Dana White started spinning the narrative that Francis Ngannou was a scared guy that left the UFC. He didn't want to fight Jon Jones. Francis was scared. He wanted to go fight B-level competition in the PFL, which is absolutely nonsense. Dana White can spin a narrative for sure. So, yeah, I just thought this was funny how Jon Jones sits out for 3 years, bulking the heavyweight, and then whenever he finally does show up to heavyweight, he just looks like a fat unk at the barbecue. I mean, come on, dude. He was never bulking the heavyweight. He was waiting on Francis to he was waiting on the UFC to either give him $50 million or for Francis to leave the UFC, and that's exactly what he got. So he beats Cyril Gane. He becomes the heavyweight champion, right? Jon Jones is originally scheduled after he won the heavyweight title, right, against Cyril Gane in UFC 235. I think it was March 2nd of 2023, right? So he was scheduled on November 11th, 2023. Him and Stipe Miocic were scheduled to fight, I believe, in Madison Square Garden, right? Jon Jones pulls out of this fight with the injury. I think he tore his pectoral muscle. So Jon Jones is out of the fight, right? Him and Stipe, they're supposed to go at it. It's supposed to be looked at as the greatest light heavyweight versus the greatest heavyweight, despite Stipe being an old man, right? So Jones pulls out, right? So no harm, no foul. That same night that they were supposed to fight, Tom Aspinall defeats Sergey Pavlovich on 2 weeks' notice, by the way. He stepped on this fight on 2 weeks' notice, knocks out Sergey Pavlovich, who was on a 6-fight win streak, all first-round finishes, in 69 seconds to become the interim champion. So UFC 2, I forgot what card this was, but either way, UFC 2023, November 11th, 295. It's on the screen. UFC 295, Jon Jones, or Tom Aspinall knocks out Sergey Pavlovich, right? He becomes the interim UFC champion. Now, what does that mean, right? There's an interim champion in Tom Aspinall. There's an undisputed heavyweight champion in Jon Jones. Jon Jones and the Stipe fight is done, right? We're not going to go back to that. There's an interim champion now. You can't do the Stipe fight, right? Wrong. The UFC rebooks Stipe fight for MSG in 2024 at UFC 309, despite Tom Aspinall being the interim champion. And wait, even better, Tom Aspinall had a freaking title defense of his interim title at UFC 304 against Curtis Blaydes. So despite being an interim champion and having a title defense against Curtis Blaydes, this guy's Jon Jones is the most disputed heavyweight champion in history. Let me just say that. But the UFC and Dana White still think it's okay to rebook the Stipe fight. By the way, Stipe Miocic, 42 years old, been out of the cage for nearly 4 years, hasn't won a fight in nearly 5 years. They give the shot to Stipe Miocic against Jon Jones, despite there being an active interim heavyweight champion who is ready to go, ready to fight Jon Jones. And I believe Jon Jones or Tom Aspinall weighed in as a backup fighter for this fight. Let me just say, there's no way in hell Jon Jones was taking on Tom Aspinall as the backup fighter if Stipe would have pulled out. Jon Jones would have tucked his tail into the corner and said, I'm not fighting Tom Aspinall on short notice. I'm old. I have to get a training camp and be ready for him. You know, he's old. He's younger than me. He's bigger than me, blah, blah, blah. Nonetheless, this is whenever Jon Jones started to become an absolute embarrassment as a heavyweight champion. This is one of the most embarrassing things I've ever seen. And the fact that the UFC allowed this is also embarrassing. But nonetheless, they go on with the Stipe fight, right? Jon Jones fights Stipe Miocic. He defeats him at UFC 309. He finishes Stipe in the 4th round or into the 3rd round. But right before UFC 309, Jon Jones had some words about Tom Aspinall that I wanted to read. I get that Tom's an exciting fighter. I get that finally, after 16 years, we finally found someone who's 7 years younger than me, 30 pounds bigger than me, Jones said. Like, we finally found someone who may give me a great challenge, and everyone wants to see it so bad. But for me, what's in it for me? He changes nothing if I beat him. Beating Tom is just like beating Cyril Gane. The main goal is to get past Stipe. If I can do it really dominant, devastating fashion, then the desire in my heart would be like, okay, now it's Alex Pereira. If the UFC doesn't want that to happen, because ultimately it's the boss's decision, then it won't happen. I'll just move on with my life. But one of the ways I look at it is, would you guys rather me lose or get one more super fight? And the only super fight that makes sense to me, not to everyone, but to me and my team, is Alex Pereira. So Jon Jones openly admitting that he does not want to fight Tom Aspinall, and he would rather fight Alex Pereira after the Stipe Miocic fights. And he low-key accidentally admitted that he would lose to Tom Aspinall. Listen to that sentence. I look at it what it is. I look at it as it is. Would you guys rather me lose me or get me one more super fight? Well, he didn't say lose. He said lose me, but he knew what he was saying. He was saying he was going to lose to Tom Aspinall. Fuck that, dude. But either way, Jon Jones pretty much said before defeating Stipe Miocic that there was zero chance he was going to fight Tom Aspinall. He called Tom Aspinall a nobody, said he's done nothing. He's been here for 10 minutes, despite Tom Aspinall being in the UFC since 2020. 9 wins in the UFC, all finishes, the lowest average fight time in UFC history. Interim UFC champion, defended his belt, wins over guys like Tom Aspinall. Sergey Pavlovich, Curtis Blaydes. Who else? Sergey Spivak, Andrei Arlovsky. And there's a couple more, but either way, Marcin Tybura, Tom Aspinall, I get it. The heavyweight division isn't in the best state, and he doesn't have the best wins. But to say he's beaten nobody and done nothing, I get, compared to Jon Jones, he arguably hasn't done nothing. But in terms of today's standards for the heavyweight division, he's done a lot. Look at Jon Jones before he got the shot against Shogun back in 2011. Who would he beat? Ryan Bader? Oh, Ryan Bader got you a title shot? But Tom Aspinall is 9-1 in the UFC with the only win he avenged being a fluke loss to Curtis Blaydes, but he's done nothing. Absolutely hypocritical BS by Jon Jones. Then fast forward to March 2025, which is the recent news that came out after all that, he beat Stipe Miocic, right? He said that he might give the fans what he wants to see. Money talks, blah, blah, blah. Jon Jones saying he wants $30 million for the Tom Aspinall fight. And I say give him $30 million. Give him his money. Jon Jones now reportedly wants 6 months to prepare for the Aspinall fight once it's locked in. So not once, like, the fight is, like, not right from 6 months from now. From when the fight is signed, he wants another 6 months to prepare. So if we sign this fight this summer, we're looking at Tom Aspinall versus Jon Jones in 2026. And we already know what would happen. Jon Jones would sign the fight. He would pull out with an injury. And then he would claim that, yeah, you see, I'm not scared of Tom Aspinall. I pulled out because I had an injury. I wasn't scared. I signed the contract. But what a coincidence that, what is it for the testing program of the UFC's doping? It's 6 months, right? You already know Jon Jones is going to be blasting steroids up his ass for 6 months, get all the benefits he can to train with it, and he's going to cycle off of it. But you know what? I don't care. There's not a steroid on this planet that's going to help Jon Jones whenever if he chooses to fight out Tom Aspinall. I do not think he will. But if Jon Jones gets in that cage with Tom Aspinall is going to sleep this man. He's going to knock him out. Jon Jones is used to fighting little scrawny, small, light heavyweights that are 4, 5, 6 inches shorter than him, and he has like a 10+ reach advantage over all these guys, and he spams eye pokes. He's a dirty fighter. He's a steroid cheat. He's a wife beater. He's alcoholic, all the above. There's so much to dislike this guy for. And like I said, his fans always want to put it as, oh, dude, you're always hating on Jon Jones for stuff he does like outside the cage. Well, yeah, we're talking about stuff he does inside the cage. Steroids, that's inside the cage. Helps with your recovery. I mean, you're taking guys as brain cells and you're taking steroids. Like, come on, dude. I just don't get it. And the fact that this guy is saying he needs 6 months just speaks volumes to where his mind is. He's not confident he can beat Tom Aspinall. When has a fighter ever in the history of the UFC needed a 6-month training camp for anybody? That's obviously just going to be him overtraining. There's nothing you can do in 6 months that's going to prepare him for Tom Aspinall. He's going to be older. He's going to be slower. Mark my words. If he fights Tom Aspinall, he is getting slept in the first round inside of 3 minutes. Call me a hater. I believe that. Jon Jones notoriously struggles against bigger opponents. Every single time he's fought a guy his size, Dominic Reyes, Alexander Gustafsson, Cyril Gane was the only guy that was somewhat his size. The guy with the worst grappling in the heavyweight division he was able to submit. But whenever he fought guys like Reyes, guys like Santos, guys like Gustafsson the first time, he struggled very bad. And Jon Jones hasn't throughout his career. Look at his career. Who has Jon Jones fought that had like crazy power? Daniel Cormier? Not really. Glover Teixeira had decent power. It's like Cyril Gane, no power, you know? Thiago Santos, old man at the time. Dominic Reyes had power, but Dominic Reyes arguably won that fight. So it's like Jon Jones has literally built a career, and it's frustrating because Jon Jones is he has the best resume in UFC history, right? But it's also overrated because of the ducking, because of the steroids, because of all the nonsense and the shenanigans he pulls inside and outside the octagon. This guy's a disgrace. He's the worst heavyweight champion in the history of the UFC. It's not even close. Name a worse heavyweight champion than Jon Jones. This guy had became heavyweight champion in 2023, and he's fought one time since. He has 2 fights in the last 5 years. He's a steroid head, and now he wants 6 months. What do you know? Like I said, the cycling for drug testing in the UFC, 6 months. He wants 6 months to prepare once the Aspinall fight's locked in. Coincidence? I think not. But that is all the crap that Jon Jones did. And for his fans that are always coming at me saying, dude, you're just a hater. Am I just a hater? Would you not agree to some degree that this is justified? That Jon Jones is an absolute scumbag of a human being. He doesn't deserve anything he has. I don't understand how anyone can sit behind their computer or behind their phone and watch the sport or wherever they're at or in a bar and look at this guy and say, I like Jon Jones. He's a model guy. You know, I really hope he wins. Like, what does this guy have to do? Another point I want to drive home that pisses me off is whenever Jon Jones or his fans say, Jon Jones doesn't owe anybody anything. You know, he's been around the sport for Jon Jones doesn't owe anything. Like, he can step away. No. Fuck that, dude. He owes the sport everything. He owes the fans everything. This guy's been an absolute scumbag. He owes us the chance to see his ass get knocked out, and I think he will. Nonetheless, you guys already know I'm going off the rails right now about Jon Jones. Let's get to the last segment of the video, and where I want to talk about Dana White and the UFC. Dana White and the UFC have allowed Jon Jones to run the show. What does Jon Jones have of Dana White? Does he have, like, a video of, like, Dana White, like, eating... Never mind. I'm not even going to say that. But does Jon Jones have some expletive video of Dana White doing some crazy shit that he doesn't want him to release to the public? Because Dana White has went out of his way to publicly not say Tom Aspinall's name because he doesn't want the UFC and himself to make Jon Jones look worse than he already is. So he will not say Tom Aspinall's name. He repeatedly slandered Islam's name, saying Jon Jones is the pound-for-pound #1. Shout out to Kevin Iole for calling him out on his BS. Claiming that Jon Jones was the pound-for-pound #1 fighter in the world, despite only having 1 fight in 5 years after beating Cyril Gane, or 4 or 5 years, whatever it was. So claims that Jon Jones is pound for pound #1 over active Islam Makhachev. Claims that Jon Jones wasn't scared of Francis, despite saying the contrary when the fights were first started getting talked about and the money was a problem. And then now he's claiming that Jon Jones and Tom Aspinall is 100% going to happen. At this point, I don't know what's going to happen. I don't think the fight will happen, I'll be honest. I do not think Jon Jones wants to fight Tom Aspinall. That's why he's pricing himself out at $30, $40, $50 million. That's why he's talking about he needs 6 months to train and all this other crap. Jon Jones does not want a piece of Tom Aspinall. Jon Jones just is a narcissist. He wants his name to be in the headlines. And the way he does that is by holding on to that precious little fake heavyweight title that he has, that it has no value. We all know that Tom Aspinall is the real heavyweight champion. He has the same amount of title defenses as Jon Jones. And guess what? I wouldn't even count Jon Jones's title defense as a legit title defense. He took Stipe Miocic to nearly the 4th round. Do you know what Tom Aspinall would do to Stipe Miocic? He would bury him inside of 45 seconds. I'm so sick of this drug cheat, steroid head, wife abusing, just scumbag of the earth. Like, if you're defending them, I don't know what else to say. If you're a Jon Jones fan and you support this guy, unsubscribe from my channel. I really don't care. And yeah, man, I don't understand why Dana White and the UFC are so insistent on like just doing whatever they can to go out of their way to do everything in Jon Jones's favor for the sport, moving events on a week's notice for this guy, allowing him to compete in the UFC after multiple failed drug tests, allowing him to continue to compete in the UFC after getting into this domestic dispute with his wife where he banged his head against a cop car and got arrested for that, making the UFC look bad, ducking his active competition, being a PR nightmare. It's like, this guy's done everything that any other fighter in UFC history, if they would have done, they would have been shunned from the business and never spoken about again. But for whatever reason, Jon Jones gets to walk all over everything, and there's no consequences for it. It's crazy to me. And like I said, man, it's really Dana White and the UFC just shilling for Jon Jones. And what's crazy is a lot of people speculate that the reason they let Jon Jones get away with like murder, so to speak, is because he's a big star. You know, he does a lot for the UFC in terms of pay-per-view sales, but does he really though? How much did this fight with him and Stipe do? Did it do over $1 million? I doubt it. What about his fight with him versus Cyril Gane? Did it do over $1 million? I doubt it. Him versus DC1, his most hyped up fight, in DC2, neither of those fights did over $1 million. So it's like, is Jon Jones really this insane pay-per-view star? Or is the UFC just so desperate to say they have the best heavyweight in the world, and they love that Jon Jones beat Cyril Gane easier than Francis Ngannou did, and they want to say they have the best heavyweight in the world? They want a Michael Jordan of the UFC, whatever the hell it is. They have bent over backwards for Jon Jones. Jon Jones is a shameful champion. He's a scumbag of a human, and no one should support him. That's it.